My name is Clara, and I'm 32 years old. For most of my life, I believed that peace was found in quiet endurance, in the careful art of making myself small. But nothing prepared me for the moment that quiet shattered, watching my brother, Ethan, strike my 6-year-old daughter, Maya, across the face at our annual family gathering. Worse, far worse, was hearing my father, Richard, remark with a cold nod, "Well, she needs to learn to be more careful." And my mother, Isabel, adding with a strained laugh, "Such a dramatic little thing, isn't she?" They believed they were safe in the bubble of their own authority, cocooned by wealth and tradition. But they forgot about the small, sensitive microphone my brother-in-law was using to record their legacy, a microphone that would instead record its undoing. This is not a story of revenge, but of reckoning. It's the story of how I learned that true peace isn't found in silence, but in the courage to speak the truth, no matter the cost. Growing up in the Sterling household was an exercise in understanding unspoken rules. I was the sensitive one, the dreamer, a stark contrast to my older brother, Ethan, who was the sun around which our family orbited. Our roles were cast long before I had the language to protest them. My father, Richard, a man who had built a real estate empire from the ground up, valued strength, ambition, and results above all else. Ethan was his perfect reflection, competitive, sharp-witted, and possessing an effortless charisma that masked a deep-seated arrogance. He excelled in sports, in academics, and most importantly, in mirroring our father's worldview. I, on the other hand, was more like a watercolor painting in a gallery of stark oil portraits. My mother, Isabel, whose life was dedicated to maintaining the flawless facade of our family, would often sigh with a practiced air of loving exasperation. "Clara has such a rich inner world," she'd tell her friends, a phrase I later understood to mean, "She's not like the rest of us." It was a polite way of saying I didn't fit, that my quiet introspection was a liability in a family that prized outward achievement. By my late teens, I had perfected the art of invisibility. I learned to navigate our large, echoing home like a ghost. My presence felt only when I inadvertently broke one of the many unwritten rules. My escape came in the form of a scholarship to a liberal arts college on the other side of the country. There, I met Ben. He was a musician, thoughtful and kind, and he saw in my quietness not a flaw, but a depth. We married young, when I was 21, in a simple ceremony in a public garden. My parents attended, their polite smiles barely concealing their disappointment. Ethan, already a rising star at a prestigious architectural firm, gifted us an ostentatiously expensive set of crystal wine glasses with a toast that was a masterpiece of condescension. "To my little sister, Clara," he'd said, raising his glass. "May Ben teach you a thing or two about the real world. You'll need it." For a time, Ben and I built a small, happy life far from the chill of my family's judgment. I earned a degree in social work and found a fulfilling, if not lucrative, job at a community outreach center. When I became pregnant with Maya at 25, it felt like the final, perfect piece of the life I was building for myself. Maya arrived on a soft spring evening, 6 pounds and 8 ounces of pure wonder, with her father's gentle eyes and my dark, curly hair. Holding her for the first time, I made a silent vow that she would always know her worth, that her voice would always be cherished, and that her spirit would never be made to feel small. The foundations of my own small world crumbled when Maya was 3. Ben's music career stalled, and the man I loved retreated into a world of frustration and resentment. The distance between us grew until it was a chasm we could no longer cross. Our divorce was amicable but heartbreaking. I didn't tell my family the full story, simply that we had grown apart, knowing they would interpret it as yet another of my failures. My mother's phone call confirmed my fears. "Well, darling," she'd said, her voice laced with pity, "marriage requires a certain resilience. Perhaps you were just not suited for its challenges." As a single mother, my finances became a constant source of anxiety. My salary barely covered our rent in a modest 2-bedroom apartment, childcare, and the endless stream of expenses that come with raising a child. On a few desperate occasions, I had to swallow my pride and ask my parents for a loan for a sudden car repair, an unexpected dental bill for Maya. The money always came, but it was wrapped in lectures on fiscal responsibility and not-so-subtle comparisons to Ethan's ever-expanding success. He had married Olivia, a lovely woman from a similarly wealthy family, and they lived in a glass-walled architectural marvel he had designed himself. Their life, as my parents frequently reminded me, was a testament to making the right choices. Despite the painful dynamics, I wanted Maya to know her grandparents, her aunt, and her uncle. I believed, perhaps naively, that family connections were inherently valuable and that I could act as a buffer, shielding her from the toxicity that had shaped me. So, when the invitation arrived for the annual family gathering at Seabrook, our family's heritage cottage on a remote island in the Salish Sea, I decided we would go. It would be our first time in 2 years. "Are you sure about this, Clara?" my best friend, Sarah, had asked over coffee. "They've never been a soft place for you to land." "They're still her family," I'd replied, the words feeling hollow even as I said them. "And Maya has been talking about seeing the ocean for weeks. I can handle a long weekend for her." Maya, at 6, was a whirlwind of creativity and joy. Her greatest passion was storytelling, weaving intricate tales of magical creatures and brave heroines, her small hands dancing in the air to illustrate her narratives. "Will Uncle Ethan and Grandma Isabel and Grandpa Richard be there?" she'd asked, her eyes wide with excitement as we packed her small suitcase. "And can I tell them my new story about the moonbeam mouse?" "Of course, sweetie," I'd promised, the familiar knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. I hadn't mentioned that my brother-in-law, Leo, Olivia's younger brother, and an aspiring documentary filmmaker, would also be there. My father had commissioned him to create a film celebrating the Sterling family legacy, a project I knew was primarily intended to immortalize Ethan's achievements. As we boarded the ferry, the salty air whipping through my hair, I repeated a mantra to myself: I am not that girl anymore. I am a mother. I will protect her. Looking back, I see the profound arrogance in that thought. You cannot protect a child by willingly leading her into the heart of the storm. Some lessons I was about to learn are etched into you not by quiet endurance, but by the fire of a moment that changes everything. Seabrook was not a cottage, but a sprawling cedar and glass monument to my father's success, perched on a rocky bluff overlooking the steel-blue waters of the Salish Sea. As I pulled our aging but reliable sedan into the crushed seashell driveway, parking it discreetly behind Ethan's sleek Tesla and my parents' Range Rover, I felt that old, familiar sensation of shrinking. "We're here, Mommy," Maya cried, her excitement a stark contrast to the tension coiling in my shoulders. "Can I go look for sea glass right away?" "Let's go inside and say hello first, honey," I said, forcing a warmth I didn't feel into my voice. The heavy oak door swung open before we reached it, revealing my mother, impeccably dressed in cream-colored linen. Her gaze swept over me, a quick, critical inventory, before softening as it landed on Maya. "Clara, you made it. We were beginning to worry the ferry had left without you." "Traffic was heavy, Mom," I said, accepting her cool, perfumed hug. The great room, with its vaulted ceilings and a wall of windows framing the dramatic seascape, was already buzzing with family. My father stood by the massive stone hearth, a glass of amber liquid in hand, deep in conversation with one of his business partners who had apparently been invited. He gave me a curt nod, his attention already returning to his discussion of zoning laws. Ethan and Olivia emerged from the kitchen, his arm draped casually over her shoulders. He possessed our father's height and confident posture, but his features were sharper, more deliberate. His smile was a well-practiced curve that rarely touched his eyes. "Well, look what the tide washed in," he announced, his voice carrying across the room. "The prodigal sister and little Maya. You're getting big, kid." Maya, suddenly shy, pressed her face into my side. "Hello, Uncle Ethan." Olivia stepped forward, her smile genuine. She had always treated me with a gentle kindness, a quiet recognition of my place in the family hierarchy without ever challenging it. "It's so good to see you both," she said, her embrace warm and sincere. Maya, Your cousins are building a fort on the beach. You can join them once you get your things put away. Can I, Mom? Maya whispered, her shyness evaporating at the prospect of an adventure. After we drop our bags in our room, I promised. Ethan took a sip of his drink, his eyes appraising me over the rim of the glass. Still at that little community center, are you? Saving the world one case file at a time. It's fulfilling work, I said, refusing to be drawn into his game. I was recently promoted to program coordinator. How nice for you, he replied, the condescension so smooth it was almost imperceptible. I just finalized the designs for the new waterfront development. Dad, did I tell you about the dinner the mayor hosted in our honor? And just like that, the conversation shifted, the spotlight swinging back to its rightful place. My father clapped him on the shoulder. That's my boy. Always reaching for the sky. I saw Leo in a corner, adjusting a camera on a tripod. He caught my eye and gave me a small, sympathetic smile. Leo had married into wealth, but had retained the observational soul of an artist, making him a fellow outsider. Documenting the sterling myth for posterity? I asked him quietly as I passed. Your dad wants to capture the authentic family dynamic, he said with a wry twist of his lips. I've got a few wireless lavalier mics set up to get some natural conversations. For the sake of realism. Our room was, as always, the smallest, tucked away at the back of the house with a view of the dense fir forest instead of the ocean. As I helped Maya unpack, her chatter about her cousins and the beach fort filled the small space. And can I wear my mermaid pajamas tonight? And can I tell everyone my story about the moonbeam mouse after dinner? My heart ached with a fierce, protective love. Maya's uninhibited joy was the very thing that had been so carefully pruned from me at her age. Of course, you can, sweetheart. Just maybe wait for a quiet moment when the grown-ups aren't all talking at once, okay? The first evening unfolded as expected. Dinner was a performance, with my father steering the conversation toward Ethan's recent accolades. My mother offered a stream of thinly veiled critiques, from my choice of sweater. Is that really the most flattering color on you, dear? To my parenting, Maya seems to have a lot of energy. A little more structure might be beneficial. I watched as Maya's older cousins, already well-versed in the family's pecking order, talked over her, corrected her, and dismissed her imaginative ideas with the casual cruelty of children who know their place at the top. Later, as I was tucking her into the unfamiliar bed, she was uncharacteristically subdued. What's wrong, my love? She picked at a loose thread on the quilt. Cousin Sophie said my stories are for babies. And Uncle Ethan told me that talking with my hands is distracting and I should sit still if I want people to pay attention to me. I took a deep, steadying breath, the words a ghostly echo of criticisms I had heard my entire life. Maya, listen to me. Your stories are wonderful and your hands help you tell them. That's part of your magic. Some people are just a little too grown up to remember what magic looks like. Grandpa Richard said you used to daydream too much, she whispered. And that's why you didn't get to be an architect like Uncle Ethan. I closed my eyes, fighting a surge of anger. Well, sometimes grandpas don't know everything, I said, forcing a lightness into my voice. And being an architect would be boring. I'd much rather help people and listen to your stories. She giggled, the shadow lifting from her face. I kissed her forehead. Tomorrow, we'll go to the beach and find the most beautiful sea glass, just us. But as I lay awake that night, listening to the distant sound of my father and brother's booming laughter from the deck below, I couldn't escape the feeling that I had made a terrible mistake. You can't build a fortress against the tide by standing on the shore. Some places are toxic down to their very foundations, and Seabrook was proving to be one of them. The next morning broke clear and bright, the sunlight dappling through the fir trees outside our window. Maya woke with her usual boundless optimism, the previous day's slights seemingly forgotten in the promise of a new day. Mommy, wake up. Leo said they're having pancakes with real maple syrup. She was already dressed, bouncing on the foot of my bed. I smiled, her joy a welcome antidote to my restless night. Okay, I'm up. Let me just get ready. The great room was filled with the scent of coffee and sizzling bacon. My father was at the head of the long harvest table, engrossed in the financial section of the newspaper. My mother was directing the caterer they'd hired for the weekend. Actual cooking was, of course, beneath her. Ethan and Olivia were seated near my father, discussing renovations to their city home. I noticed Leo moving discreetly, clipping a small microphone to the collar of my father's polo shirt and placing another on the table near the centerpiece. The morning passed in a haze of forced politeness. Maya joined her cousins at a small table by the window. Her attempts to join their game of Snapdragons met with polite indifference. I sat with my aunt, making small talk while my gaze kept drifting to Maya. After breakfast, the children migrated to a corner of the great room designated for play. The adults lingered at the table, the conversation growing louder as my father poured a second round of mimosas. I watched Maya, who had given up on her cousins and was now standing near the hearth, reenacting her story of the Moonbeam Mouse for an imaginary audience. Her hands flew, her face was alive with expression, her soft voice rising and falling with the drama of her tale. I saw Ethan's jaw clench. He shot an irritated glance in my direction. I pretended not to notice. "Clara," my mother called from across the table, her voice sharp with disapproval. "Could you please ask Maya to be a little less theatrical? It's rather disruptive." Before I could respond, Maya, lost in her narrative, took an exuberant step backward, her flailing arm catching Ethan's half-full glass of expensive single malt scotch that he'd set on a low side table. The heavy crystal tumbler crashed to the flagstone floor, shattering with a sound that seemed to silence the entire room. Everything happened in a horrifying instant. Ethan was on his feet, his face a mask of fury. He strode the few feet to where Maya stood, frozen, a look of pure terror on her face. I started to rise, a protest forming on my lips, but my father's hand shot out, gripping my arm. "Let him handle it, Clara." Ethan loomed over my daughter. "Look what you did. Clumsy, thoughtless girl. This is what happens when you don't pay attention." And then his hand, large and angry, swung through the air. The sound of it connecting with Maya's small cheek was a sharp, ugly crack that echoed in the sudden, complete silence. Time stopped. Maya's head snapped to the side. A collective gasp went through the room. She stood, utterly still for a second, her eyes wide with shock and disbelief, before her face crumpled and a raw, heartbroken sob tore from her throat. "That's enough of that nonsense," Ethan snapped, looking around as if seeking validation. "Maybe now she'll learn to have some respect for other people's property." My father's voice cut through my paralysis. "Well, she needs to learn to be more careful. A lesson in consequences never hurt anyone." My mother, after a moment's hesitation, produced a tight, nervous laugh. "Such a dramatic little thing, isn't she? Just like her mother." The spell broke. I wrenched my arm from my father's grasp and rushed to Maya, scooping her trembling body into my arms. The bright red imprint of Ethan's hand was already blooming on her cheek. "What is wrong with you?" I snarled at my brother, my voice shaking with a rage I had never known. "She's a child. It was an accident." "It was carelessness," he shot back, his arms crossed. "Something you might know a thing or two about. Maybe if someone had taught you a few lessons, you wouldn't be a single mom working a dead-end job." Through my fury, a sudden, cold thought pierced the haze. Leo. He was standing by his camera, his face pale, his expression horrified. And on the table, not 5 feet from my parents, the small, sensitive microphone was still active, capturing every word, every justification, every cruel laugh. My brother's eyes followed my gaze, and for the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face as he, too, remembered the documentary. "You know what?" I said, my voice dangerously calm as I held my sobbing daughter tight. "We're done. We're done with all of this." "Oh, stop being so theatrical, Clara," my mother sighed, waving a dismissive hand. "You're embarrassing everyone." I let out a laugh that was brittle and harsh. "I'm embarrassing you? My brother just assaulted my daughter, and I'm the one causing a scene." "It was discipline, not assault," Ethan growled, taking a step toward us. I recoiled, pulling Maya closer. "Stay away from us. We're leaving." Running away, he called after me as I turned toward the hallway. "It's the only thing you've ever been good at." I didn't look back. My only focus was getting Maya to safety. As I carried her up the stairs, The murmur of conversation resumed below, my family already recalibrating, smoothing over the ugliness, filing it away as another instance of Clara's oversensitivity. But they were wrong. This wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. My brother had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. And thanks to my father's vanity and Ethan's arrogance, I had the proof. The quiet endurance was over. The reckoning was about to begin. In the small, forest view room, I gently laid Maya on the bed. Her sobs had subsided into shuddering hiccups, but the angry red mark on her cheek stood out in stark relief against her pale skin. I ran a washcloth under cold water and pressed it to her face with a hand that trembled. "It hurts, Mommy," she whimpered. "Why did Uncle Ethan hit me? Was I bad?" That question, so innocent and yet so profoundly wrong, broke something deep inside me. "No, my love," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You were not bad. Not for 1 second. What Uncle Ethan did was wrong. Very, very wrong." But Grandpa Richard said. "Grandpa Richard was wrong, too," I said firmly, gathering her into a hug. "No one ever has the right to hit you. Ever. Especially not for an accident." While Maya drifted into an exhausted sleep, I began to pack, my movements swift and decisive. A quiet knock on the door made me freeze. "Who is it?" I called, my body instinctively shielding the bed. "It's Leo," came the hushed reply. "Clara, can I talk to you for a second?" I opened the door a crack. "Now's not a good time, Leo." His face was etched with distress. "I know. I'm so sorry. Listen, I got it all. The sound is crystal clear. The slap, what Ethan said, your dad's comment, your mom's laugh, it's all on the audio track." He glanced down the empty hall. "They'll probably tell me to erase it. But before they do, I can make you a copy." A cold, hard clarity settled over me. "You do that." He nodded, his expression resolute. What he did was assault. And the way they all just closed ranks. It was monstrous. "Olivia is horrified. She doesn't know I'm talking to you, but she's not okay with this." "Thank you," I whispered, the words feeling inadequate. "We're leaving. As soon as I'm done packing. Meet me by my car in 15 minutes. It's parked down the service lane. I'll have it on a flash drive for you." After he left, I called Sarah. She answered on the second ring. "How's the family gathering from hell?" she asked, her tone light. "Ethan hit Maya," I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. "He slapped her for spilling a drink. And my parents defended him." "He what?" The warmth vanished from her voice, replaced by cold fury. "Clara, tell me you're getting out of there right now." "Packing as we speak." "Can we come to your place?" "I don't want to go home. My door is open. Come straight here. Stay as long as you need." By the time I gently woke Maya, our bags were packed. "We're going for a sleepover at Auntie Sarah's house," I explained, keeping my voice calm and steady. "It's a surprise." As we descended the main staircase, my mother intercepted us in the grand entryway. "Where on earth do you think you're going?" she demanded. "Home," I said simply. "Don't be absurd. You're not leaving over one little misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding doesn't leave a mark like this," I said, turning Maya slightly so the light from the window illuminated the still angry handprint on her cheek. For a fleeting moment, a flicker of something, was it guilt, crossed my mother's face, but it was quickly masked by her usual defensiveness. "Children bruise so easily. You're making a mountain out of a molehill, Clara." "Am I?" I countered. "Would it be a molehill if someone slapped you for spilling coffee? Or if I slapped Ethan for being an arrogant prick?" "That's entirely different," she sputtered. My father appeared at her side, his face a thundercloud. "Clara, you're being hysterical. Your brother has apologized." "He is not," I cut in. "And you're creating a scene that is deeply upsetting to this family." He then played his final, most familiar card. "If you walk out that door, don't come asking us for help the next time you can't pay your rent. This well has run dry." The threat, which had held me captive for years, had lost its power. I looked him straight in the eye. "Keep your money. My daughter's safety isn't for sale." As I reached for the door, Ethan emerged from the great room, a fresh drink in hand. "Running away, little sister? Can't handle the consequences of your own deficient parenting." I paused, turning to face him fully. The only consequence I'm concerned with is the one you'll face for showing everyone exactly who you are. Is that a threat? He sneered. No, I said, opening the door to the cool, salty air. It's a promise. Leo was waiting by his car, tucked behind a screen of salal bushes. He pressed a tiny flash drive into my palm. The audio file is named Seabrook_Day2_Atmos. Be careful, Clara. They're my family too, in a way, but what happened in there was unforgivable. I won't involve you unless I have no other choice, I promised. The drive back to the city was a blur. Maya slept in the back seat while my mind raced, replaying the scene, the words, the sound of the slap. By the time we pulled up to Sarah's apartment building, a plan had begun to form, not of vengeance, but of meticulous, undeniable accountability. That night, after Maya was asleep in Sarah's guest room, Sarah and I sat at her kitchen table and plugged the flash drive into her laptop. Are you ready for this? She asked gently. I need to hear it again, I said. I need to be sure. The recording was even more chilling than I remembered. The casual cruelty in Ethan's voice. The sound of the impact sickeningly clear. My father's cold justification. My mother's nervous laughter. It was a perfect symphony of dysfunction. Oh, Clara, Sarah whispered, her hand covering her mouth. This is evil. I know, I said, my resolve hardening into something sharp and clear. The question is, what do I do with it? You could go to the police, she said. That's assault. I agreed. And it would become my word against the word of the wealthy, powerful Sterling family. They'd paint me as an unstable, vindictive single mother. But I looked at the file on the screen. They don't know I have this. And this changes the equation. Over the next few days, I began my research. First, I took Maya to her pediatrician, who documented the fading bruise and gave me a referral to a child psychologist. She's exhibiting signs of acute stress, Dr. Evans told me. Night terrors, separation anxiety, a new fear of loud noises. This wasn't just a slap, Clara. It was a traumatic event. Next, I met with a lawyer friend, playing the audio for her. Legally, a criminal case would be tough, she advised. But in the court of public opinion, and for any professional board with a morals clause, this is dynamite. That phrase, morals clause, ignited an idea. Ethan had always been proud of his firm's public commitment to ethics and community. He sat on the board of a prominent children's art foundation, a position he loved to mention at family gatherings. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. The decision was sealed 3 nights later when I was woken by Maya's screams. Uncle Ethan was chasing me, she sobbed, clinging to me. He was mad I was telling a story. As I held my shaking daughter, whispering assurances that she was safe, my path became clear. Ethan had stolen my daughter's sense of security. He had tried to silence her joy. The cycle of abuse and enablement that had defined my family for generations had to end. It would end with me. The next morning, with a steady hand and a clear heart, I began to compose 3 emails. My first step was to build a foundation of irrefutable evidence. Dr. Anya Sharma, the child psychologist, was a godsend. After her first session with Maya, her assessment was stark. Maya is experiencing trauma responses consistent with a physical and emotional assault by a trusted authority figure, she explained, her voice gentle but firm. Her reluctance to tell her stories, the very thing that brought her so much joy, is a direct result of this event. What happened was not discipline, it was a violation of her safety and trust. She provided a detailed, written report that became the cornerstone of my case. Next, I filed a formal police report. The officer was empathetic but pragmatic. Honestly, without this recording, it would be a he-said-she-said situation, she admitted. But with this audio and the psychologist's report, we have a credible record of events. It's on file. That in itself is significant. My phone had become a battlefield. My mother's texts were a dizzying mix of pleading, please call me, we can fix this, and gaslighting, you're tearing this family apart over a misunderstanding. Ethan's messages had escalated from dismissive arrogance to thinly veiled threats. I didn't respond. Instead, I meticulously prepared. I created a concise, 2-minute audio clip the sound of the slap, Ethan's cruel words, my father's justification, and my mother's laugh. I attached this clip, along with a dispassionate, factual summary of the event and a scanned copy of Dr. Sharma's assessment, to 3 separate emails. The first was addressed to the entire board of directors at Ethan's architectural firm, Sterling and Croft. The second went to the executive committee of the Children's Arts Alliance, the foundation where he served as a board member. The third was sent to the editor of a prominent architecture and design magazine that was scheduled to run a glowing profile on Ethan the following month. Each email was carefully worded, professional, and free of emotion. I stated that as a matter of conscience, I felt obligated to share this information, given Mr. Sterling's professional and community roles, particularly his involvement with an organization dedicated to child welfare. I requested that my identity as the source be kept confidential, citing the need to protect my daughter from further trauma. There's no turning back from this, Sarah said, her hand on my shoulder as I hovered my cursor over the final send button. I know, I replied, thinking of Maya's tear-streaked face. He made his choice when he raised his hand to her. These are just the consequences. The response was immediate and seismic. Within hours, I received a frantic call from Ethan. What have you done? He roared into the phone. The board called an emergency meeting. They're talking about suspending me. You need to retract this. Tell them it's a lie, a family squabble. I said nothing and hung up, then blocked his number. My parents' numbers followed. Leo called that evening, his voice low. All hell has broken loose at Seabrook. They know you did something, but they don't know how. Ethan is threatening to sue you for slander and defamation. Let him, I said calmly. The truth is an absolute defense. Your parents are telling everyone you're unstable, that this is about money and jealousy over Ethan's success. A bitter laugh escaped me. Of course they are. That's the only story they know how to tell. It's easier than admitting their perfect son hit a 6-year-old. The following morning, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Olivia, Ethan's wife. Clara, she said, her voice strained. Can we meet? We met at a quiet cafe. She looked exhausted, the perfect veneer she usually wore completely stripped away. Leo played me the full recording, she said, her hands trembling around her coffee cup. I heard it all. She looked me in the eye. Has he ever been like that with Maya before? No, I said honestly. Never physical. But the anger, the dismissal, that's always been there. She nodded, a tear tracing a path down her cheek. He's like that at home, too. Not the hitting, but the rage. He broke a chair last year when a project was delayed. He calls me useless when I don't agree with him. She took a shuddering breath. I've been making excuses for him for years. But hearing what he did to a child, to your child, I can't make excuses anymore. A wave of empathy washed over me, so strong it was dizzying. Olivia, I am so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you in this. You didn't, she said, her voice gaining strength. He did. And maybe I'm the one who needed to hear it most. She straightened her shoulders. I've gone to stay with my parents. I told him he needs help. As Olivia and I parted ways, I felt a profound shift. This was no longer just about one slap. It was about a pattern of behavior that had been enabled and hidden for years, poisoning everyone it touched. The professional fallout for Ethan was swift. His firm placed him on an indefinite leave of absence pending an internal investigation. The Children's Arts Alliance issued a public statement announcing his immediate resignation from their board, citing a commitment to ensuring a safe environment for all children. The magazine canceled his feature profile. The story began to leak, first in whispers among the city's elite, then more broadly. Friends and acquaintances reached out, not with judgment, but with support. Several shared their own stories of family secrets and toxic dynamics. A small, unlikely community began to form around me. My father, realizing his usual tactics of intimidation were failing, tried a different approach. He left a voicemail, his voice heavy with false sincerity, offering to pay for a family therapy retreat in Hawaii to heal these unfortunate divisions. It was so transparently a bribe to buy my silence that I almost laughed. The true turning point, however, came from an unexpected source. My Aunt Carol, my mother's sister, called me. Clara, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I was there. I saw him hit her. And I didn't say a word. I've been sick with shame ever since. She paused. Your parents are trying to rally the family, to get us all to sign a letter supporting Ethan. I won't do it. What he did was wrong. And what they did by defending him was just as bad. Her call was the first crack in the dam. Soon, other relatives reached out, some to offer support, others simply to say, we saw it, too. You're not crazy. The Sterling family's united front was a fiction, and the truth was finally breaking it apart. The foundation was laid. The truth was out, not as a messy, emotional accusation, but as a cold, hard, documented fact. Ethan's carefully constructed world was crumbling, not because of my rage, but because of his own actions, finally brought into the light. I had done my part. Now, all I could do was focus on Maya's healing and wait to see if my family was capable of choosing truth over legacy. In the weeks that followed, the family fractured. The lines were no longer drawn by blood, but by conscience. My parents, clinging to their narrative of my instability, found themselves increasingly isolated as more relatives privately acknowledged the truth of what had happened. The final confrontation came not from me, but from my grandmother, Evelyn, my father's mother, and the family's formidable matriarch. At 87, she was a woman of few words, but immense moral authority. She summoned the key family members to her stately home in the city, a command, not an invitation. I won't bring Maya, I told her on the phone. She's not a prop in this drama. Good, Evelyn had replied, her voice crisp. This is for the adults who have been behaving like children. I walked into my grandmother's formal living room alone. My parents were seated stiffly on a damask sofa. Ethan stood by the window, looking haggard and thin. Olivia was there, too, seated apart from him, a quiet and steady presence. A few of my aunts and uncles were scattered around the room, the air thick with unspoken tension. My grandmother entered, leaning on a silver-handled cane. She surveyed the room, her gaze sharp. I have lived a long life, she began, her voice clear and strong. I have seen this family through births and deaths, triumphs and scandals. But I have never been as ashamed as I am today. My father started to speak. Mother, if you would just let us explain. I need no explanation, Richard, she cut him off. Leo, being a man of integrity, felt I had a right to the full story. I have heard the recording. A stunned silence fell over the room. Ethan's face went white. She turned her piercing gaze on him. You struck a child. Your own niece. A little girl who adored you. And you did it out of pettiness and rage. She then looked at my parents. And you too. You laughed. You justified it. You chose to protect the abuser over the abused. You failed as parents and you failed as grandparents. You don't understand, Mother, my mother whispered, her composure finally cracking. Clara has always been difficult. Difficult? My grandmother countered. Or just unwilling to participate in the fiction you've all constructed. A fiction where Ethan can do no wrong and everyone else must cater to his ego. Her eyes settled on my father. I know where he learned it. I watched your own father rule this family with his temper. I stood by and said nothing, and I have regretted my silence for 50 years. I will not make that mistake again. The room was heavy with the weight of unspoken history. This isn't about punishment, Ethan, I said, finding my voice at last. It was quiet, but carried in the still room. This is about what you took from Maya. She has nightmares. She stopped telling her stories for weeks. She asked me if she was bad. Do you have any idea what it does to a child to believe they are bad for having an accident? For simply taking up space in the world? For the first time, Ethan looked not angry, but broken. I didn't mean. I know, I said, and the anger I had carried for so long finally gave way to a profound sadness. You didn't mean to. You just acted. And you expected everyone to smooth it over, the way they always have. But the impact is the same, whether you meant it or not. It was Olivia who spoke next, her voice unwavering. That's why I'm filing for divorce, Ethan. The words landed like stones in the quiet room. Because it's not just one incident. It's a pattern. And I will not bring children into it. The meeting ended not with a resolution, but with a shattering. The old family structure, built on a foundation of secrets and lies, had crumbled. 6 months later, I sat on a park bench, watching Maya chase butterflies. She was laughing, a sound that was once again pure and unburdened. Her sessions with Dr. Sharma were now monthly, and the nightmares had faded. She was telling stories again, her hands once more dancing in the air. My life had changed in ways I couldn't have foreseen. My new promotion at the community center to program director had given me financial independence. The fear that had been my constant companion for so long was gone, replaced by a quiet confidence. My relationship with my parents was tenuous, built on carefully managed visits in neutral, public places. They were in therapy, separately and together. My father was learning, haltingly, to speak a language other than criticism. My mother was trying to find an identity outside of being Richard's wife and Ethan's defender. It was slow, painful work, and I didn't know if our relationship would ever fully heal. But for the first time, it was honest. Ethan had left his firm and the city. Olivia told me he was in a long-term treatment facility, addressing the anger that had cost him everything. I felt no triumph, only a deep sorrow for the man he might have been. The most unexpected gift was the deepening of other family bonds. I had a standing weekly tea with my grandmother. My Aunt Carol and I had become close. Leo and I bonded over our shared role as family truth-tellers. And Olivia, my former sister-in-law, had become one of my dearest friends. We were a new kind of family, forged in the fire of a crisis, held together not by obligation, but by mutual respect and love. That afternoon in the park, Maya ran to me, her face flushed with excitement. "Mommy, I made up a new story. It's about a little bird who was afraid to sing, but then she learned her voice was so strong it could help the flowers grow." Tears pricked my eyes as I pulled her into a hug, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair. "That's a beautiful story, my love. Tell me everything." The slap that was meant to silence a child had, in the end, given voice to a truth that had been suppressed for generations. It had forced a reckoning that was painful but necessary. In losing the family I thought I was supposed to have, I had found the one I truly belonged to. I learned that strength isn't about enduring pain in silence, it's about having the courage to say no more. It's about building a sanctuary of love and truth, brick by brick, even if you have to tear down the house you grew up in to find the space. And it's about teaching your children that their voices, their stories, and their very existence are not a disruption, but a gift to the world.